Fasecolda is offering a technological tool through which you can consult all the information on the development of the 2018 Insurance International Convention. By means of our web app, you can have access to the academic agenda of the event and the corporate information of each one of our attendees. In order to learn about its usefulness, please watch the following tutorial.
Al momento de la inscripción, haga clic en el símbolo de menú ubicado en la parte superior izquierda y regístrese como visitante al seleccionar la red social con la cual quiere acceder. En el menú de inicio encontrará noticias relevantes del evento. Después encontrará el módulo de agenda, en el cual podrá ver el listado completo de eventos para conocer la fecha, hora, lugar, conferencista e incluso agregarlo a su agenda para crear su propio programa de asistencia. Conozca el perfil de cada conferencista y acceda a su información de contacto. Para esto, ingrese al perfil y baje para conocer su cuenta de Twitter o correo electrónico. Este mismo proceso está disponible para la sección de asistentes. De hecho, nuestra web app le permite contactar virtualmente a cualquier asistente al evento. Para que su relacionamiento sea efectivo, haga clic en Mi perfil y actualice su información. Si quiere, puede hacer el mismo proceso para contactar a los patrocinadores del evento. Finalmente, lo invitamos a participar de las encuestas que puedan ser programadas durante el evento, a conocer la información general y a que nos contacte. Gracias por asistir y le deseamos que disfrute su evento.
As of this moment, you can access the program's link, or you can just scan the QR code. So now you can also follow our Twitter, and you can present your opinions there. You can learn about the most important moments and comments about the event, and this way you can share your experience, your comments. Those that attended the Lloyd's event Colombia, this was an opportunity that showed business opportunities with agents of this company. Okay, we are at the Naval Museum of Cartagena de Indias. This building is part of the history of the walled city. It was built in the 17th century, and it was the venue for the first Jesuit school, and it allows to see the neoclassical design. And it became also a place for battalions. Now, let's go straight to the point. The insurance sector, as a fundamental actor in the country's development, is responsible for identifying and now opening the public opinion on the topics of greater interest for Colombians. Given the country's economic and political situation in this opportunity, the academic agenda has been designed to analyze from different standpoints topics that are very important for the insurance sector, such as action plans in development and infrastructure, how to face the public health problematic resulting from road accidents, the sonar process, and also the regulation of the industry and political perspectives of Latin America, among others. Now we would like to give the floor to Jorge Humberto Botero, Executive CEO of Fasecolda, and he will be addressing you shortly. Mr. Botero, you have the floor. Minister of Finance Alberto Carrasquilla, President and Vice President of the FASECOLDA's Board of Directors, distinguished authorities, superintendent, colleagues from insurance and reinsurance companies, friends from the media, President Duque. The unfortunate coincidence between your annual conference and your intervention in the United Nations conference doesn't allow for you to be here. I'm pleased that you have sent a virtual presentation that is going to be transmitted to the audience. So you learned about the vision we have about the country and about the insurance sector in a very complex situation, but also a very promising one. So it's great that you've sent a discourse. Colombia, a country which is advancing. We see that figures that look at the present and at the past. That's why it's represented with two faces that look at opposite sides. This characteristic shows that this is like the symbol of politics that have fight, confrontation, and also it also shows consensus to overcome the election processes is what takes place in certain moments, and there is the wrong belief that they find a country in chaos and that we have to start from scratch. Colombia is a country that is underway. Each one of the presidents that we will have since the end of the dictatorship of former President Rojas in 1957 can consider that gave a better country than the one received. The honorable administration of Duque deserves an amazing success. The insurance community, loyal to its slogan of working towards a safer country, will contribute to this result in whatever is in our hands. I'm going to present some data that indicate the national progress. Between 1960 and 2017, the economy grew at a rate of 4.1%, while Latin America grew at 3.6%. During that time, the GDP showed negative variations only once, in 1999. There was a contraction in the region in 5 opportunities. Between 1945 and 2017, the per capita income had a 5-fold increase. We went from being a poor country to one of middle income. The life expectation that wasn't reaching 40 years of age is now of 74 years old. Even though we have problems of quality in health sectors, the system does guarantee almost a total coverage. When it comes to gross enrollment rate, in tertiary education went from 4% in 1970 to 53.3% in 2014. Between 2018 and 2017, the percentage of poor households went from 42% to 26.9% of the total population. The percentage is still high, but the speed of its reduction is noteworthy. The Gini coefficient that expresses income distribution improved from 2008, when it was 0.567, to 0.508 in 2017. It was an important drop. Last year, the homicide rate was of 24.5 per each 10,000 inhabitants per year, the lowest one in 41 years. Citizen security, the challenges that concern us. According to figures of the prosecutor's office, in April, that indicator shows a deterioration, and this it's a trend that was sustained for over 4 decades. It's the result of territorial disputes against or between criminals for those territories that belong to FARC, and also the cultivation of coca bushes. and also the earnings of that illegal business related to the depreciation of the exchange rate and to poorly designed subsidies to fuel, which is a necessary input to produce coca bushes in border areas. Within this context, we would like to support the decision to make it mandatory to eradicate illegal crops. This measure should be put in place very carefully by peasants. They lack other opportunities, and they have that's one of the populational groups that is most vulnerable of our country. We have always been struck by the voluntary substitution programs. They have taken place in the areas where coca bushes are growing. It seems absurd that agronomic, logistic, and social conditions adequate to grow coca bushes are also good areas to grow oil palm, rice, corn. I think that the solution will need to be differently. The design and the commissioning of comprehensive colonization programs in different areas to those that are grown with coca bushes, and the idea is to have areas to grow their crops with good highways. These developmental poles will take place if there is a presence of the state with all its service battery, security, justice, education, health, assistance, public services, etc., in order to create adequate conditions for private investment. If this flows in sufficient amount, we will have virtual cycles to expedite the country's growth. A similar strategy was deployed by Brazil in mid last century. One was the construction of Brasilia, that became the capital. The vast territories of the Colombian Orinoquia, 27% of the total surface of our country, could host settlement processes sponsored by the government to benefit peasants that are growing coca bushes and they want to start a new life under legal terms. The high level of homicides in areas that were in the past controlled by guerrilla require effective actions in order to hinder these activities. The new administration is making efforts to avoid many of these illegal activities from happening. As to the identification of those crimes, we are pleased to know that the rates informed by the prosecutor's office, almost 50%, are consistently better than for the other homicides. That's 21.5%. Economic security. To look after fiscal stability requires urgent actions. The important achievements already mentioned took place within context of high growth. For example, in the years between 2002 and 2014, the annual average growth rate of the national economy was of 4.7%. And this result was the result of the tailwind caused by external factors and by the accumulation of capital and work. Current circumstances are different. External demand is not growing at high rates. It's not easy to inject new investment resources and human talent to the economy in the magnitudes of the past. Therefore, we have to have a more dynamic domestic market and to improve productivity if we want to go back to growth, to potential growth rates of more than 4% per year. This without compromising the effort, which has not been that successful, of looking for new destinations for the export of our agricultural and industrial production. In order to achieve this, government, congressmen, and businessmen have to assume the fiscal restrictions that have been accrued in spite of the tax reforms in order to maintain the credibility of the holders of the external debt and a significant portion of, those investments made by foreigners. We are committed to achieve objectives that are part of the fiscal rule after its flexibilization. We must, by 2027, achieve a maximum fiscal deficit of 1% as a production of GDP. Given that it is a far away goal, it seems that it will be easy to achieve it. It is not so. We have annual goals. The one of this year is of 3.1%. Most likely, it will be necessary to reduce expenses given the lower tax collection that is expected. If we will meet our goals and if we will not be capable to return to the anticipated path, then the foreseen result is well known. We will have depreciation of the exchange rate, credit problems. In addition to this, we have other negative factors in the environment which force us to be very careful. The crisis in Argentina and Turkey, the rise in interest rates in the U.S., which will have negative effects in the cost of the debt, and the extraordinary efforts of spending imposed by the massive immigration of Venezuelans that are fleeing from their unfortunate situation experienced there. So, as we say, things are not that easy. Whether we like it or not, we have to implement a strategy to reduce spending, and its first stage is not to have new spending programs but just establishment of income sources to fund what's missing for next year's budget, which according to estimates of the Ministry of Finance is of 25 trillion Colombian pesos. This is very close to 10% of the total scheduled spending for 2019. Recently, President Duque has expressed that the path to close that gap will not be through a tax reform, but a law to fund the 2019 budget. We have to indicate that this path is part of the Constitution and it can be used to access missing resources through new income. Nevertheless, in our opinion, if we decrease taxes, this could not have an indefinite term because the idea is to carry out a budgetary exercise to adjust this. If we had good reasons in this statement, which could be debated, the government will have to move in two periods. The first one should include this year in order to solve the situation of the 2019 budget, and in the second period to present a tax reform before the Congress of the Republic that will have a long-lasting vocation. I mean, we have to decide between what's urgent and what's structural. Whatever decision is made, we're going to mention a set of policies that we consider relevant, almost all of them coming from the expense commissions that were convened by the past administration. Spending is way too high, and for that reason, its effectiveness is low in many cases. Public spending in Colombia is one of the most flexible in the region, so we have to give flexibility to it. Different studies indicate the fraud to the government social programs is way too high. Those that are part of CISBEN and those that are poor are using very poorly the programs of childhood education is something that must be done. it would be advisable to say that the resources coming from royalties that belong to the nation should be integrated under one national budget. The central government has a huge investment portfolio that covers entities in chemical, transportation, hydrocarbon transportation, energy, telecom, finance, air transportation portfolio, among others. For all these activities, we could have available private capital. An asset mobilization policy will enable to produce significant resources to be invested in strategic sectors that are not served by individuals, to reduce public debt and to potentiate the growth of the economy. Even though the progressivity of fiscal revenue should be taken into account, what really matters is the situation after direct transfers to the beneficiaries of social spending via a focalization of this process. The value-added tax collection is slow if you compare it to countries such as Bolivia, whose informality is very high. The effective structure of extensions and plurality could be the cause of that negative result. When the tariffs to business income is way too high, then we lose competitiveness, and hence the generation of employment in the industry and in the agricultural sector is disencouraged. The Congress has the power to reduce some tax rates for future periods based on what happened with variables such as an increase in collection in specific cutting dates, tax benefits of all sorts. If a collection is reduced, that's why they should be temporary and they should be included in the national budget. Legal security, to recover it is a challenge of huge proportions. One of the most important innovations of the Charter of 1991 consists of a process that we call tutela. It was an extraordinary legal instrument to obtain the protection of fundamental rights that were infringed or threatened by public authorities, and in many cases by individuals. With time, its nature has changed. Today, we do not know which are those fundamental rights. While in the constitutional text, it was clear that it was only used by individuals, but now it seems that corporations have those rights. Through this, we've seen that this has become a mechanism to attain the intervention of judges to defend certain politicians. Its extraordinary character has disappeared, and today that's an instrument that is used in all the ordinary legal processes. That's why the principle of thing judged is now restricted. We can always introduce a tutela, even against the sentence of tutela, to postpone sentences. We've seen that rivers, Amazon and Atrato, have fundamental rights, and therefore they could be subject to this legal process called tutela. If this absurd jurisprudence succeeds, all the judges of the Republic as tutela judges could make decisions in environmental aspects, displacing and subordinating competent authorities in the national and territorial scope. If through a tutela sentence you can break the structures of the civil code without any justification whatsoever, enforce legal rules are not binding then for judges. The insurance sector is going through regulatory instability stemming from the decisions made by the courts regarding annuities, contracts, and protection against disability risk for those that are covered by Social Security. In both cases, the insurer assumes long-term commitments that for them cannot be modified. Therefore, when these are altered by judges, the legal requirements to access benefits, when the contract is entered into, so then the insurance is affected, and it's quite a damage. An example of this regulation is enough. Well, the concept of a child in the regulation is the person that has been born or the child has been adopted, then this sentence should be understood in a broad sense in order to include as beneficiary legitimate adopted and raised children by solidary paternity assumption. The accumulated effect of decisions such as this one, in many cases of retroactive effect, has changed and affected those protections. In this Congress, Arturo Solarte and Luis Jaime Salgado are going to be proposing formulas in order to redirect the tutela action so it can follow the path it was established for. Another challenge comes from recently adopted decisions by the General Comptroller's Office that goes against the principle of trust, which serves to protect individuals or corporations with unjustified modifications that are done by authorities or the interpretation of rules that have been understood in such a way by the insurance community, the Comptroller's Office, and the Financial Superintendency. We hope that with the prudent intervention of Carlos Felipe Córdoba by the Minister of Finance, Alberto Carrasquilla, it will be clear what should always have been, that insurance companies are grantors of fiscal responsibility under the conditions established in the agreements. So insurance and reinsurance market of civil compliance and responsibility could be reopened. They protect the state and state companies. Impacts of road accident rate in public health and in the insurance of risk produced by them. In this conference, the Minister of Health will talk about the severe public health problem because of high road accident rate and the strategy to be developed by the current administration in order to mitigate this scourge. Likewise, an expert assigned by IDB will present the best international practices in order to mitigate this. That is one of the core topics of the policy to be adopted. The other one is to strengthen the alliance between the state and industry in order to reduce accident rate and to jointly guarantee, together with the health sector, a timely and quality service to the victims of these accidents. Just some figures are enough in order to inform about the social impact of such a problem. Last year, 5,458 people lost their lives and around 690,000 were injured. To quantify the economic value of expenses in health stemming from this scourge and their effects in the long term, Fasecolda has conducted a very responsible study that is going to be disclosed in this convention. The first aspect, the prevention of accident, needs to be a priority in the government's agenda. Some of its elements are as follows: to go over the state of current roads and the design of those to be built in the future in order to guarantee high safety patterns, to adopt strict requirements to authorize the operation of driving schools, to verify the the characteristic of those that are looking for a driver's license and retraining drivers that are involved in traffic accidents. To establish actions in order to avoid evasion. This behavior becomes a financial burden to the public health sector, and it allows irresponsible drivers to transfer the consequences of the social damage caused. We must point out that at present evasion is of around 42% of circulating vehicles. The use of IT technologies enables to detect those that are evading this. They have to pay, and if they pay, we can recover resources of more than 1 trillion Colombian pesos per year. The second aspect that we must take into account is the tariff or the fee structure of this insurance that has been defined by the Financial Superintendency based on the characteristics of the vehicles covered. The advantage of this rule is that it enables to set the fee that corresponds to each case. However, the inconvenience is that it treats equally all those that take the insurance and even though no matter which is the risk or the accident rate, and also the fee needs to be sufficient to guarantee the sustainability of the system. Year after year, the superintendency verifies this. Nevertheless, since the motorcycle fee is not sufficient in order to cover the risk produced by this segment, the existing regime established a crossed subsidy mechanism. The owner of four-wheel or more vehicles pay premiums above what they are supposed to pay. If we didn't have these subsidies, given the high accident rate of motorcycles, the fee for this contingency should be much higher. Within this context, it is necessary to make reference to the initiative presented by distinguished members of the parliament, which consists of establishing a mandatory liability insurance stemming from traffic accidents. Since SOAT is a health insurance and their finances are in partial balance, we could not use those resources to finance a new coverage. Therefore, we will have to endow it with their own resources, which should be established based on sound technical studies. Even though some more advanced countries than ours have put in place this new coverage, the Congress will have to go over this to see if this is the timely moment to do this in Colombia. Our commitment with the national government, I would like to say that the industry has been coaching the development of road infrastructure projects of the past administration, and we want to continue doing the same thing during these coming 4 years. We have actively participating in the discussions of the pension reform, which is urgently required by Colombia. Aware of the fact that annuities, insurances are necessary for the pillars based on the contribution capitalization techniques. We are at the disposal of the government in order to operate at the social protection floor within the context of the reform of periodic economic benefits, which has the acronym BEP. There were not that many progress during the past 8 years. However, it is important to broaden the coverage of informal workers. We want to continue expanding agricultural risk coverage with adequate products for peasant and business segments. We're going to coach the government in the program to rent houses with the option to buy it for low-income groups. We are already working in the design of the coverages required by the invitation of the Ministry of Housing. We congratulate the issue of the decree that favors those that buy houses which are part of safe housing, which was issued 2 years ago. This is a necessary instrument in order to protect the savings of Colombian families when these apartments or houses that represent their life savings will collapse or should be destroyed. To wrap up, I would like to say that together with the national government, we have increased the depth of the population regarding insurance. Because we have the 53% of households count on our coverage. We've gone a long way, but we still have a long way to go. The lack of adequate protection is the reason why some households are impoverished. Minister Carrasquilla, you've given broad explanations on the legality of your behavior before the Congress. Likewise, you have accepted to debate it within the field of ethics, in spite of the fact that in a liberal society that is part of our conscience. We firmly believe that you're acting in the episode of the water bonds do not deserve any reject. Hopefully, you are going not to be blamed for any of that. I'm positive about it. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Botero, for your address. And it was said by Mr. Botero, the President of the Republic, Ivan Duque, cannot be here with us, but he has informed about his interest to work with insurance company, and he has sent the following message. Special greetings to the members of the trade association Fasecolda, to its president Jorge Humberto Botero, and to national and international guests that are part of this international insurance conference. This is an important event. I would have liked to be there, but because of international commitments, I wasn't able to make it. And I want to thank Fasecolda for giving me this opportunity to convey this message. The first thing that I would like to say is that I acknowledge the two-way gain that enables us to work together. For you, it's important to have good levels of economic growth in order to reach the market's maturity. And to us, it is important for you to do well so you can contribute to the country's economic development. Even though we have an economy that, if compared to Latin America, is growing above many countries there, we are far from the expected growth that we should have. That's why we are going to promote an economic reactivation, thinking about the future in order for the economy to grow even more, and for it to be released from many things. I would like to invite the insurance, reinsurance sector, and of capitalization corporations to build together the future of Colombia. We are going to be in this administration only 4 years, and what I would like is to start building policies that would last in time, not for my success, but for the success of the entire country. That's why I value the way the insurance sector works, that it not only presents its concerns, but it also proposes solutions that we can build together. The moment is here to build together a great agreement for Colombia. We want to recover legality, that is the marriage between security and justice. We want to promote entrepreneurship, and we want to produce equity. Those are the three pillars we're working on for the National Development Plan. Those pillars fit very well with the task of your sector, because you provide safety, security, you help in our country's investment, and you improve the quality of life of Colombians with insurance tools. I know that the sector has a very complex situation, but I also know that it has the DNA of resilience. To make opportunities out of difficulties, and you know that you're going to do better as our future mindset. The business sector is going to feel that the state help you grow, and not that the state only produces obstacles. Many contributions could be made by the insurance sector to the country. That's why we want to work hand in hand with you. Colombia needs a good infrastructure, and it's possible to have that if we have insurance instruments which will facilitate the completion of works given the materialization of implicit risk. We are going to have the necessary discussions. We are going to have an opportunity to make sure that we have legal security in infrastructure projects, making sure that none of the works that we build will be limited by not having the insurance that supports it. On the other hand, it is necessary to work together, the government, insurance company, and transportation companies, to set an agenda that will guarantee the insurance capability of the sector. At the government, we should facilitate technological tools, and we should offer guarantees in order to avoid insurance evasion in Colombia, thus offering guarantees in order for the transportation sector to produce more trust amongst insurance companies. Insurance companies should be committed to obtain more coverage policies at more competitive prices, and transportation companies should timely acquire and in the formal manner the required policies, and must strive for better best practices in order to reduce accident rate. As a government, we are going to move forward in the promotion of best practices that will guarantee road security and significant reduction in accident rates. In addition to this, we will formalize the transportation sector in order to broaden the insured base, guaranteeing the protection of the activity and the equity of transportation companies. On the other hand, we have to look for an equitable pension system without affecting acquired rights or shortly expectations. The insurance sector can be of great help given Colombia's dignifying conditions in order to access a pension. We need to dynamize the annuities market, eliminating obstacles that have resulted in having Colombians migrate to the scheduled retirement. We have to look for solutions to that problem. We also want to promote the region's development, and this goes through promoting productive projects in rural areas. Producers require protection mechanisms that will guarantee that if there is a catastrophe or if there is any hydrometeorological risk, they could resume their activity in the near future, and that's achieved by insurance. We have to develop micro-insurance in the Colombian rural areas. My dear friends from the insurance sector, the work done by your trade association is one that says very good things about our country. With allies, as you, I believe in the future of Colombia. I wish you much success in this convention, and I hope I can have the opportunity to get together with you. I have participated many times in this convention. Sadly enough, I'm not able to be there with with you as president of Colombians, but I believe in the role played by the insurance sector for health, for transportation, for education, for the rural sector. I believe that the insurance coverage instruments are vital for development. I wish you much luck. Thank you very much. To recover the path and to make progress in public finance are the challenges of the new administration. Now I would like to give the floor to Alberto Carrasquilla, Minister of Finance and Public Credit of Colombia. Good evening. I would like to start by thanking Jorge Humberto Botero for this invitation to participate once again in this important insurance convention that is very important not only for the sectoral debate of insurance but for the debate of the Colombian public policy. I have been here many other times and I have enjoyed much this convention. I've seen the agenda, I've seen the topics to be covered, and I find very interesting this agenda, and I'll be expecting with much desire the results of these 2 days. I would like first to talk about the fiscal trajectory of the country. I would like to express the guidelines of the response that we have designed given the fiscal situation that we are facing. I would like to divide that explanation in a chapter that I would call the picture and on another chapter that I would call the film. The fiscal situation of Colombia is very complicated. It is quite difficult. Our indebtedness indicators, which is the way in which we should measure the difficulty or not of the fiscal situation, is not easy. We have high public debt indicators within the public debt accounting. We have not included additional obligations, and I'm referring to the fact of future spending that has become a payment obligation in the infrastructure sector and also in other sectors. I would like to talk about the explicit debt that is part of this, and these payment obligations should be added to this. Secondly, we have the health-related topic. The state owes some money to insurance companies of the health sector, and then insurance companies of the health sector owe that money to health providers, and to the extent that the payments are not being made, that needs to be understood as an additional debt. There are some estimates that go from 5 trillion Colombian pesos to 10 trillion Colombian pesos that must be added to previous figures. We also have different legal sentences that cannot be appealed, and they have been acknowledged as such, but they are not included in indebtedness figures, so we have to pay those sentences. And the sum of these resources represent other 5 or 6 trillion Colombian pesos, and obviously they are very expensive loans. We have a very complicated picture. We have debt indicators that if we sum up everything, this exceeds 50 or 55% of GDP. And that affects our maneuvering capability without any doubt whatsoever. A very poor picture. As to the budget, In the short term, we have to solve the problem of a deficit. And I would like to explain that the budget being analyzed in the first year of administration is the most complicated one because a coming administration inherits some budgetary guidelines presented by the previous administration. Hence, when the new administration starts, then there is a budgetary debate with some text, with some assumptions, with some approaches that are to a certain extent inherited. Based on that budget, we start with the first debate at the Congress of the Republic, and it is necessary to make the necessary modifications. And we have found that in this opportunity, the budget was perfectly funded, but many of the programs with the assumption that it was funded, were left unprotected. The sum of budgetary processes, budgetary obligations that didn't have a budgetary allocation for 2019 sums 25 trillion pesos, Colombian pesos, as was mentioned by Mr. Botero. So it was necessary to analyze with the Congress of the Republic in our phase budgetary debate the way in which we could fix that problem in order to obtain resources to fund this deficit in terms of the funding of important programs to the country that were not part of the bill that was subject or that was presented last June. The second part of this picture is not good. We had that deficit, and now we have reached some conclusions. The first debate was completed. It was approved that the discussion debate in the Congress was excellent. I have had the opportunity to prepare many budgets in the past, and I think that in this opportunity, the decision made by the government of presenting with total clarity the fact that we had a significant deficit informed about the need of moving forward in problem solving, and we reached some conclusions in the first debate which are extremely important. In other words, at present we have clarity in the sense that even though it was not possible to build a solution for 2.5 points of GDP, which will have been the amount of necessary resources so that in 2019 all the programs will be funded, it was indeed necessary to arrive at a conclusion, and that was to have like 1.5% of GDP as a requirement. That 1.5 points of GDP as a requirement has been divided into various chapters. The first chapter is one of austerity. We have worked hard in terms of the places of the national budget in which we can reduce operating expenses. During the first year, we cannot attain that much. 1,400,000. That's like the first adjustment. In the following years, we believe that we are going to be capable of increase that deepening in reduction and in expense reasoning, and we have a program that is just starting, and it is a purely administrative program by means of which we are going to put in place different reforms that we will be explaining and what are going to result in reductions in public spending. That's an experience that we had in the past, and it was then called the Public Administration Renewal Plan. Right now there is a work team working on it. We are not going to have results in the near future, but in the middle future. So those adjustments in public spending is important in the administrative phase. Also, what Mr. Botero said with accurate figures. We have some concerns. In the previous administration, they started analyzing a subsidy bill. We are positive that there is an excess of spending in terms of subsidies and social programs in Colombia. I want to give you an example. As it was shown by Mr. Botero, we were a country with 50% of the population in poverty conditions mid the last decade, and today we are a country with 26% of population in poverty conditions. In the subsidized health system, that favorable dynamic has not been reflected. We have 50% of the population in the subsidized health system, even though dynamically we are a country that is putting an end to poverty in a gradual manner. I do not want to talk about the diagnostics that the Commission on Public Spending have and the reasons the government had to present this bill. So that first chapter has short-term components that are reforms or spending reductions that are going to be difficult. I have received lots of unpleasant phone calls regarding the reduction of the first year. Secondly, the implementation of a public policy reform that it could be done from the administrative standpoint, starting with subsidies. And now we have the tax chapter. As it was said by Mr. Botero, we have three big tax chapters, but they are poorly focused, mainly that of personal income. In that chapter of personal income, we have a tax by law, which is for a country very different from the one we have now. That chapter is for a relatively poor country where there is a lot of collection difficulty, a country that doesn't count on the technologies and where other sources should be identified. In countries of OECD, 85% of the income tax is for individuals and the rest for companies. In Colombia, it's the opposite. That tax, every form of 85-15 of a country of high income, that is where we have to start moving. So that is that the tax by law is kind of small now regarding the distribution between corporations and individuals. That's the first front. As to business income that was shown by Mr. Botero, the mission of experts in tax area, the analysis conducted by the best economists of the country on the tax topic, the analysis made in the board of directors in the different companies when they come up with the effective rates, and the work done by Andy, which is one of our trade associations, says that we have to tackle the excess charge to corporations, and that second chapter is one that we are working on. And the dispersed value-added tax that was shown by Mr. Botero is like a scattered value-added tax. This is a very sensitive topic. I am aware of that, but it's a topic that we have to put on the table. Once again, we have a tax by law that is, it's like small to this country. This is a country of mid revenues. It's a class with a middle class that is growing. It is a country that is developing, has urban development, and it has a tax by law that is too small. It's like a shirt that looks too small. It doesn't fit. It's too small for the country. So that needs to be fixed, and that's something that we are doing, and that's something that we're going to present within the context of the financing law debate. I have a disagreement with Mr. Botero on the effectiveness of the budgetary law, which abides by the principle and also the debate regarding a financing law by affecting tax. It has a vocation, a long-lasting vocation, but that's something to be analyzed in the coming days. So we have the arguments, and we are going to respect Mr. Botero's standpoint. We also have a chapter on evasion, and it has two components. The first component is that this is not philosophy. This needs to be something practical, and the practical thing goes through two instruments. There is no one to avoid evasion. We need to have a simple tax system that will not enable shortcuts. Ours do not comply with that condition. And secondly, a more sophisticated use of financial information and transactional information of the economy. So we are wasting a lot of information that we already have and that we could use much better. And thirdly, a formalization of transactions regarding electronic invoicing that we are starting to introduce in the country. It's a gradual introduction. If we simplify the system, if we can use the database, then and if we use better methodologies, and if we see that electronic invoicing will come into the country, we're not going to see results the first year. However, we've heard of international experiences that say that after 2 or 3 years, we're going to have important results. And when it comes to the fiscal topic, I think it is very important the fact that in Colombia, as of 2012, this specific mechanism is crystallized, but we have a long tradition of laws of fiscal responsibility. That is, since the crisis of the 90s, we have been very systematic in this country, and we have issued laws. We have thought about fiscal sustainability as an axis of what the public policy should be in Colombia. And that makes us different from other countries. And I think that the main anchor that we have in our country is, on one hand, the midterm fiscal framework that informs the country, investors, where is the government heading to, or where does the government see the direction of public finance, also the growth rates of the country for the coming 10 years, and which short and midterm measures should be adopted in order to make sure that this route is met. As of 2003, when we started thinking about these terms in Colombia, every year the ministries of finance have done this exercise in a responsible manner. Part of our fiscal ADN is to think about the midterm fiscal framework and the way in which the policy that we implement today has to do with a desire of midterm fiscal system. And then we have another component, which is the fiscal rule. This administration is very firm in the sense that the fiscal rule has to be met. It has to continue being the anchor that gears the orientation of tax policy and of public spending to. The graph that was shown by Mr. Botero is one that needs to be part of the backbone of the Ministry of Finance, because we need to go there in spite of the difficulties and in spite of the possibilities, short-term possibilities, in spite of short-term temptations. We need to have that trend, and we need to have that fiscal rule as our anchor. So we're going to be involved in the legislative agenda in the second part of the tax debate and in the financing law debate, which includes those chapters that I mentioned. So the coming months are going to be devoted to that. In October, we have to introduce a very important bill, which is the biannual royalty budget. And in February, we'll need to introduce, as was said by the President of the Republic, the development plan. You're going to hear about this in this convention. It's going to be presented by Gloria Alonso, and she's going to present in much detail this midterm analysis in the country. So that's the immediate economic agenda, but we must not lose sight of the fundamental topic, which is the pension topic and the royalties topic. I do not want to talk about royalties because that's going to come in the near future, but I do want to talk about the pension topic. I am concerned because pension debates ignore a fundamental topic, and it's that of coverage. Today, we have 75% of the population at retirement age without any type of pension coverage. That's the first figure. Secondly, we have a demographic trend that indicates that that's not going to become a small problem. It's going to become a big problem if we do not do anything. The population at retirement age is going to grow much in coming years. The census gave us a first surprise because we have aged more than what experts had indicated as a country. But we are going there, but that's a problem that is not going to be solved to the country. It's going to become a greater challenge. We have to think if we are capable as a country to have in 25 years a reversion of that ratio, 75-25, and the only solution the country could have is formalization, the formalization of labor activities, the adoption of a savings culture, etc., so those that in 25 years will reach retirement age will have a pension coverage, and to revert the trend, so it will be 75% those that do have it and 25% those that do not have it. But there are many reasons to have concern and to have a plan B. One of the reasons why formality is not of 90% in Colombia and only of 50% is because we have some regulations in the labor market which are way too costly to meet. The formal sector hires at a relatively high cost. Just to give you an example, between the legal minimum wage and the mid-wage of the country, it's amongst the highest ones in the world. So with that ratio, it is very difficult to move forward at the pace we would like. Formalization will move forward, so we have to think about pensions. And I think that one of the most important things that we have is that topic on periodic economic benefits. They have the acronym of BEPs. I think that BEPs or BEPs are a mechanism that if we do not solve the problems of structural rigidity in our economy, we will need, or an important part of the population will need to go towards BEPS, and BEPS are not working properly. And now, yeah, they are 1,200,000 members, but if I mean, they can continue pay, but that needs to be solved because that's the only way we can move forward. I think that BEPS could be strengthened in different ways. Those that are in the formal sector that cannot build a savings base to reach the minimum wage for pension, instead of receiving the compensation that is set forth nowadays, they can receive a right to a BEP or BEP. And as of there, they could build an annuity based on those BEPs. I think that we have to move in that direction in the short term, and that needs to be part of the pension analysis. But then there is another topic that was mentioned by Mr. Botero. If the annuities market is not being working for the pay-as-you-go system, it is a system that is shared, and the lack of an annuities market is going to be important. It's going to be an important constraint in order to protect a country with an excess of informal population that is aging. So I'm concerned that that problem is not quickly solved. The discussions that are going to be held in this insurance convention are very important when you're going to talk about the annuities market and the legal instabilities, not only for the pay-as-you-go system, but if we think in 25 or 30 years, and the formalization of our market will not take place, then we're not going to be ready to have a B plan, and as a generation we're going to fail if we're not going to be able to solve the problem. So it's a problem that is more severe than what we could consider. That as to pensions. And after that we have the reform of that 25%, that if we're going to have a pillar or not, that if the pay-as-you-go system is going to be issued or not. But this needs to go hand in hand with a discussion of 25% of the population that is excluded. The reform should consider both things, the formal sector and the excess of subsidies in that sector, and the way in which we can strongly move forward when it comes to coverage. To conclude, when it comes to royalties, that's one of the most painful things that we can see. The deficits in the general budget of the nation and the surplus in the royalty budget, the pace of infrastructure projects for the development of the country doesn't go hand in hand with the expansion of resources that are coming to the royalty system. There is a lack of speed, which is very costly. So we have 12 trillion pesos, Colombian pesos, that are not used. While in the general budget, we need more than that. When it comes to investment, the harmonization of the experts commission, and we see that many things were included in the royalty system, and there are some benefits for a Ministry of Finance, that perhaps if that money goes away, we'll have more fiscal deficit. But from the standpoint, we know that those resources have an opportunity cost. We have royalties problems that need, hence the system needs to be amended, so the royalty discussion has to take place. But my main concern is the cost of opportunity of those frozen resources. To summarize, we have a difficult picture when it comes to fiscal matters, but I think that we have a film or a movie that is very promising. We have some reforms coming up. We have a good dynamics at the Congress of the Republic. We have worked very well in those economic commissions in a harmonious manner, with peace of mind, with a great spirit. So I think the way to present this has been very useful, and this is an approach that there are sources and there are use. So obviously we have some obligations, but we have to get the money to do this. We should not engage in philosophical discussions. No, we have to look for a way to fund this, and that's the main reason why I thought it was very important for the discussion of the budget to go hand in hand with its funding or financing. In the midterm, we have a Colombian ADN of fiscal responsibility, which is one that we must advocate, that we must strengthen. And the bottom line is that we have the fiscal rule. As to pension, the problem of the lack of an annuities market is more important for the future well-being of Colombia. And as to royalties, we need to be aware of the huge opportunity cost of those frozen resources. So we have to revisit the recommendation of experts in public spending that we're talking about the unification of that budget. Well, this is what I wanted to say. Thank you very much for the invitation, Mr. Botero. Thank you very much, Minister Carrasquilla, for your attendance in this 2018 Insurance International Convention. I'm sure that you can count on the industry to make of Colombia a better country. Ladies and gentlemen, now we are officially opening this convention, and we have a magic night to this year. The opening cocktail is sponsored by Fase Colda and by other offices like Liberty Mutual Insurance, Liberty Specialty Market, Lloyd's Columbia, Swiss Re, Market International Insurance Company, AXA XL, Hanover Re, SCORE, Oficina de Representación, Mitsumi Tomo, Terra Praxis, Star Company, and Munich Re. And you can share through Twitter the most interesting comments of our conventioning using our Twitter account and using the hashtag Convención 2018. Please wear your badges all the time. If you've forgotten it, you can go to the stand to replace it. Hema Tours, our travel agency, has transportation available that will take you back to the Hilton Hotel as of 10:30 tonight. We'll start at 8:30 tomorrow. Now we have a cocktail party, so please join us at the Baluarte San Francisco Javier, where you can enjoy a marvelous night, live music, a cocktail party for all of you, and obviously the magic of this city.